Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking another look at the Navarin because I had such a ridiculous game in this ship. We are bottom tier against some super ships here even, but even in a tier 9 battleship like this, very focused on secondaries and brawling, we could still have a really good game. It really comes down to positioning. We're very alone on this flank, but we know that generally subs spawn across from each other. There's no carrier to deal with, so here we shouldn't have too much to worry about. I'm really just hoping that someone pushes me, or at least comes out to this flank. And we get ourselves a Mecklenburg. So we're gonna just secondary him to death, basically. A lot of the secondary battleships at tier 9 can play like this. You've got the Ruprecht, you've got, of course, Palmer and Freddy, things like that, Georgia. There's a lot of these battleships that are more secondary focused, almost battle cruisers in a way. Iwami, I guess, also kind of fits that style, I suppose. And they're kind of tricky to play in randoms a lot of the time. But if you can find positions on the map where the enemy team is kind of forced to be closer range to you, it can work out. Obviously, this position wouldn't work if there was a carrier in the game, or there was a sub on this flank, or there were more DDs in the game, for example. But against all these battleships, we can try and make it work. Navarin, of course, does have some pretty ridiculous secondaries. Just has a lot of them. They don't pen a lot, but they do pen enough to shoot at superstructures and do some damage. And the fire chance is ridiculous, so that's where a lot of our damage is going to come from. Unfortunately, the Azumo did manage to get a salvo into our citadel there. I was thinking he was behind the island too much to actually hit us, but nope, he claps us out here pretty good because Navarin, of course, has a gigantic citadel. Not a lot of the battleships that are so secondary focused have such a massive citadel, but this one does, and oh boy does it hurt. But notice we've already done 50k here to this Mecklenburg. It's been a pretty good start so far for a tier 9 ship. Unfortunately for us, we don't have torpedoes either. It's a bit of a downside if you are playing one of these ships without torpedoes, is if you do decide to brawl it out, and the other guy who you're brawling does have torpedoes, you can be in a bit of a bad situation. Fortunately for me here, I am going to get saved by our Kurfürst here, and we're going to try and hit the cheek, but no, we actually shot a little too early and bounced. But fortunately for us, our GK does come to save the day. I think he ate a bunch of torps there, unfortunately, but thank you for keeping me alive. I do appreciate it. And now we have an Azumo again. Now, we are a little better angled at this point. We're not going to get as greedy, although I would love to shoot all of my guns, but hey, we can bounce everything if they doesn't hit my superstructure at this angle. And then, of course, we do rely on those fires. It's a weird ship to play, a lot of these secondary battleships in random battles. If you can, try and play them in ranked. We do not get any citadels there, unfortunately, but hey, 7 full pens, not too bad. Approaching 100k at this point is pretty nice to see. And really, these ships do want to play in smaller games with closer quarters scenarios, which is ranked a lot of the time. But you'll notice that in random battles, if you do get a flank like this, it can work out. The real issue, though, is just that random battles typically don't look like this, do they? And there we go. Front guns, we do get our citadel, which feels pretty nice. And now I think it's a Condi we have to deal with on such low HP. This is going to be a little bit tricky. But secondaries do reach pretty far. The Navarin, if you did miss it, is a tier 9 Russian battleship, of course. And it's got long-range accurate secondaries is kind of the idea behind this one. And even though the main guns aren't the most accurate, they can still do some okay damage. I don't think this one's available for sale right now. I think the event just ended. Sorry, I'm putting this out a little after that. I do apologize. But mainly around the Navarin is a lot of ships that do the same thing. I've already mentioned a lot of them. Ruprecht, for example, in the tech tree. You can get this same playstyle for free, perhaps an even better version of this playstyle. One of the main reasons I didn't necessarily recommend people buy this ship earlier this month, just because the way it plays is a lot like some of these other battleships at tier 9 that do have those secondaries. So even though this is going to be a good game, I do think that you could get this playstyle out of a lot of different battleships at this tier. It's hard to do in randoms, but I think it can work out. At least if you have the battle cruiser line from the Germans, having the concealment match the secondary range is just a very, very powerful thing to have. Now there is a destroyer here in the decap, so we've loaded the HE. And even though our guns aren't the most accurate, we will try and hit this guy with the high explosive. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you don't have accurate guns. The game was just going to give you good RNG anyway. So we just take him out real quick. And then towards the end of this game here, we do have a Montana to deal with. We've been on very, very low HP for a while now. So perhaps that's been helping our DPM a little bit. But I'm surprised we haven't actually gone down. I don't usually get games like this where I just kind of get ignored. But yeah, the enemy team just kind of ignored me ever since that Izumo shot. Very, very fortunate for me. So again, getting those secondaries online and just trying to light a ton of fires. Now, as we're dueling this Montana here to end this game, I do want to make a quick note that I'm not showing you the mediocre games that I'm having in a Navarin or any of these secondary battleships. When I'm doing these post-commentary things, they're typically going to be my better games because they're just more entertaining. So don't think that every time I'm playing this game, I'm getting games like this. That is not the case at all. These are more of the exception. You have to be full sending a lot of games where you just die very, very quickly to get matches like this. I would say these are maybe 10% of the time, if that even. These are very fortunate games to get. They're not always going to work out this way. So don't think that just because you saw a video of this ship or of this playstyle, I suppose, that I'm going to be getting that all the time and you should feel bad if you're not getting those. It's very, very difficult to get games like this where everything seems to work out pretty well for us. I think the game probably supports a more passive playstyle a little bit easier than this. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, is just that battleships have a lot of RNG when it comes to their main gun. So even if you do push and position yourself really well, sure, the secondaries are going to do this chip damage very consistently, but finding these broadsides and doing damage to them isn't really guaranteed at all when you're in a battleship. So if you're pushing in aggressively trying to make these plays work, and then you find that one ship that goes broadside to you, and your whole push kind of hinges around that ship dying, and then you do 0 damage to that. It happens to me too. These games are not always going to be the kindest to you. So if you are looking to play this playstyle, that's where I say ranked is going to play a little bit better. But there you go, nearly 250,000 damage in the Navarin. Pretty crazy, since this ship I didn't think would be all that great all the time, and yet I got a lot of good games in it. The Sigma being, what, 1.4 on this ship is just atrocious. So to have some good games like this really surprised me. So maybe it means that some of these secondary battleships that are on paper a little better, like Ruprecht, for example, could even do better than this yet. Those torpedoes certainly would have been handy for some of those rushes earlier on, too. As for the build here on the Navarin, of course, I went with a full secondary build, and they do change a little bit depending on which one you're playing of these secondary battleships. But for this one, I actually went all in, just because I did not trust the main guns. And as you saw from that game, a lot of our damage, probably like half our damage, came from those secondaries plus the fires. So yeah, going full secondary here can be a pretty good idea on some of these ships. Not all of them. Some of them will benefit from their main guns a little bit more. As for the upgrades here, Preventive Maintenance got a nice buff for those secondary battleships where it now gives you 15% survivability on those secondaries, so they stick around a little bit longer. IFHE is only really recommended for me if it allows you to pen 32 millimeters of armor, at least at these higher tiers. Unfortunately here, it's not going to do that. It's only going to get us up to 27, I believe. So that, to me, is not worth it. There's not enough armor in the game that 27 millimeters really changes things. I would much rather have the 10% fire chance. Yes, every time we hit someone, it's a 10% fire chance shell with these secondaries. It's ridiculous. That's why we had so many fires and got so much fire damage from these secondaries. Of course, getting the secondary aiming and range upgrades, taking Adrenaline Rush, and then here I'm taking Emergency Repair Expert and Fire Prevention over Concealment. And that might be a little better to take Concealment, but on this ship, we're actually not quite able to get the secondaries to match the Concealment range like we would on, say, a Ruprecht, for example, where that would be a better playstyle. Here, taking Emergency Repair Expert because of the damage controls, actually. You're going to notice that on things like a Pommern or a Freddy, things that don't have the fast-acting damage controls where you only have a limited charges, I might not take Emergency Repair Expert. But here, since we do only get 4 charges of damage control base, it's nice to get up to that 5th one. So that's the idea behind that one. And fire prevention is just always a nice skill to have to try and stay alive a little bit longer. But honestly, I do run concealment and emergency repair expert sometimes, specifically on things like the Ruprecht. I don't think my build shows, but yeah, even the suggestion here is to go emergency repair expert and concealment. So not always taking fire prevention, even though I do say I take it most of the time. There are times where I don't. But that's going to be it for the Navarin. It's another one of these. There are so many of these battleships. You got a lot of tier 9 secondary battleships. So if you missed out on this one, don't feel too bad, especially considering the Citadel. Keep this in mind. This is what you're missing out on by not playing this ship. It reminds me of the old game, really, where you remember when Montana and that whole line had their Citadel come halfway up out of the water. Yeah, it is devastating. So that is why the Izumo, hit us here and like took half our health off, right? It's very important to stay angled in this ship, much more so than, say, well, even a Ruprecht, for example. This is a free ship that you can just earn by playing the game. And yeah, look at that Citadel, right? It's even waterline, maybe a bit below waterline. Yeah, it's a lot harder to hit. So you're not going to take nearly as much damage if you do happen to be caught broadside. But that's it for today's video. Just had one more really good game in the Navarin. I just wanted to show that one to you guys before. I probably don't play it very much going forward, just because there's so many ships like this one at tier 9. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.